All right. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the NBA Fantasy Tip-Off. It is week 16 for Fantasy NBA season. I am Evan, SoCal Ball Nerd. Of course, we've got Coach Craig with us as usual. Going to get into some NBA action for week 16. Got the trade deadline coming up. Yeah, let's get into it, man. How are you, Coach?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I think this episode probably should be kind of short, sweet, and to the point, hopefully, without too much rambling on from me. But, that NBA trade deadline right around the corner. So next week, hopefully, we'll find a good time to record and everything. And then we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that and probably have some more implications in terms of fantasy, guys getting moved around, guys getting extra opportunities, everything else like that. Should make for a pretty interesting week. As kind of for the trade deadline in general, for it only being like 2 days away, really feels like nobody's really talking about it all that much.
Seems pretty quiet on the front, but like we said, maybe there's some noise in the background and we'll get some fireworks, in the next 48 hours and hear some deals. But it will be nice for fantasy purposes to see, where these players end up. And like you said, the implications of what that means down the stretch for, especially a lot of these garbage teams with young players where it's like, where can you find, a little bit of treasure on a team that's not very good? Guys like, Malcolm Brogdon get traded, right? We've talked about Scoot Henderson. That's just one example, but can a young guy like that, find his way into playing, 12, 15 more minutes a night, being fully involved, might not win any games, but, help us down the stretch in fantasy. So before we get into some trades, we definitely got some injury news. We got a couple big names, right? Zach LaVine has been battling injury all season, but now, we find out that he's going to be out the entire year. We've got Joel Embiid, who the last week or two has missed multiple games. The conversation was he won't be in the MVP discussion because the injuries and games missed. Now he definitely won't be in discussion because he's going to miss at least 4 weeks. And I think we thought it would be something kind of serious as he was missing, multiple games in a row. They're not doing that just for rest. So those are the two biggest guys probably on the list. We know Jared Vanderbilt was added to that list. Big piece for the Lakers. Maybe not a huge fantasy piece, but definitely big news. There's 3 to 4 weeks for him at least, so there may be a couple guys that benefit from that. So give me your thoughts on those 3 guys and a couple other guys that we have on there.
Yeah, so Levine's done for the year. He really doesn't make as big of an impact since we've seen what the Bulls already look like for quite some time without him. If you want to get like a Caruso to Somo, if they're out there in your leagues, you can pick them up. Patrick Williams is hurt right now too, so he's been kind of starting for a little while. They do get Torrey Craig back tonight, who missed like 22 straight games with plantar fasciitis. Maybe like a super deep league he's a guy to look at, but we'll see. They did go with the double big lineup tonight against Minnesota with Drummond and Vucevic playing alongside each other, but that's probably not going to be a case most games just because, you got Minnesota with Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert anyways. But in terms of like Joel Embiid, fortunately, it looks like it's only going to be about 4 weeks that he's missing. He did have a little bit of meniscus surgery there. Yeah, obviously, if it was on the higher end, you're talking about a 2 to 3 month absence where, a major repair on that. So we see that every once in a while for guys in sports. The most recent one that I can think of is Jeff Wilson Jr. with the 49ers. I believe, what was that, 2 years ago now? So luckily it wasn't that. Hopefully, everything is good. His rehab goes well. He comes back quickly. And in terms of like the guys replacing him, you got like Paul Reed there. There's Mo Bamba there. Like some of these guys are going to pop up on random games, but none of them that you're probably going to trust enough to play on, a regular basis. Let's put it that way. KJ Martin even got some minutes as of late too. You could see a little bit of Marcus Morris Sr. at the small ball 5 as well. Although he's kind of been tailing off as of late. Maybe if Covington ever comes back from his knee injury too, he could get some small ball 5 minutes. So a lot of different ways that they could kind of approach it just in general. And then you talked about Jared Vanderbilt. Rui Hachimura is one of the guys that we do have listed for waivers. Just kind of a guy that he did start the most recent game for the Lakers. He's small forward, power forward eligible, 16% rostered on Yahoo, 9% on ESPN, and a guy that could pick up a lot of minutes in the absence of Jared Vanderbilt. If not anything else, at least solidifies his role either in the starting lineup, or if they go back to Taurean Prince in the starting lineup next game, then obviously off the bench, his minutes would be a little bit more solidified as well. And I'm trying to remember what else we had here for injuries. So the other one that we kind of didn't mention too, Julius Randle, power forward for the Knicks, he did dislocate his right shoulder. So he's probably out another 2 weeks at this point in time. It is important to note that Julius Randle is left-handed, so probably shouldn't affect his shooting too much. Kind of surprised that he's missing as much time as he is, but the Knicks are playing pretty well as of late, although they are very, very short-handed right now and playing monster minutes for the big guys. So that could impact them long term. But obviously, when you're looking at it from the Knicks perspective, we had Josh Hart here, who is still, reasonably available in a decent amount of leagues, shooting guard and small forward eligible. 61% available, or excuse me, 61% rostered on Yahoo, 37% on ESPN. He's playing big minutes. And anytime that Josh Hart gets big minutes throughout his career, it usually ends up pretty well. He did have a triple double, I believe that was last week, which I think might have been the first of his career. It might be the second. I could be wrong, though. He might have had one like back in the Pelicans days as well. And then Precious Achiuwa is power forward and center eligible, rostered in about 30% of leagues on Yahoo, 6% on ESPN. And he's been starting as of late with no Julius Randle out there. And then OG Anunoby's been missing some time as well with an elbow injury. I do assume that he comes back towards the tail end of this week. So didn't really throw him in the injuries quite as much. We did see Ivica Zubac come back on Sunday for the Clippers. He sat out Monday on the back-to-back, which was kind of expected coming off a calf injury just in general. And then a guy that I was going to throw on our episode if we did record yesterday was going to be Lonnie Walker, because he'd been playing pretty big minutes and playing pretty well as of late. Unfortunately, he played 4 minutes in yesterday's game and then left with a hamstring injury. He had either a hamstring or groin injury earlier this year, so pretty concerning. He's probably going to miss some time. And then Cam Johnson for them as well left last night's game with a hip injury, and he was playing really well in that game too. So we'll see when he's back or not. Sounds like nothing too major for him just in general, though.
Yeah, another name too we talked about a couple weeks ago, I think, was Gary Trent Jr. as well. And again, I mean, if we had this yesterday, I probably would have mentioned him too. And he left the game, but he was getting big minutes and getting the threes and starting to score, consistently around that 14, 15 point mark. He was definitely someone on that kind of depleted Raptors team, if you will, that could be more depleted as time goes. He's still somebody to keep an eye on. I mean, the injury doesn't seem to be anything serious. Don't know what they'll do at the trade deadline. I mean, you could see, Jakob go. You could see Schroeder go. Maybe not. But if anybody moves from that team, I mean, Gary Trent Jr. is someone, to definitely keep an eye on.
He's also a guy that could be traded too.
Yeah, he could be traded, and where he lands would be the thing. I think a guy like Caruso, too, if he gets dealt, right, where if a landing spot for those guys is on a team where they get good minutes on a good offense, and Caruso, I mean, on the defensive end adds a little bit, of play too in statistical categories. So like we said, with the trade deadline, where these guys end up, what these rosters look like are going to be obviously, pretty big moving forward. On the Vando note, I think it'll be interesting to see, because with Vando playing, Prince went more to the bench. But when Vando wasn't playing, Prince was getting those minutes because Darvingham likes to have him out there because he is the true perimeter wing defender and offensive guy that Rui, unfortunately, he's not quite as good defensively. And Darvingham seems to play Torian for that reason. And it's nice if Torian can knock down the shots, because we've seen plenty of games where he's had the volume. And so it's going to be one of those things. Is Prince going to get 30 minutes because he plays the defense? Definitely something to monitor. On the Sixers, I did want to mention, Kelly Oubre. We talked about him before the show. Not a big guy, but somebody who could see an uptick in minutes. You've talked about his inconsistency. Will he play if he's not shooting the ball well? But he is a guy that, last year, was taking 17 shots a game, had 20 points and 5 boards a game. And obviously this year he's, taking about 10 shots a game, missed some time. Great matchups this week. If you're looking for some streaming option, you've got the Sixers, down here. They've got the Warriors, Hawks, and Wizards coming up. Oubre should be able to get it done in the scoring column against those teams. I mean, they just give up a lot of points. It's fast-paced. It's guys that, he matches up well against to, I think, kind of light up the stat sheet. So, now's the time to probably buy him. It might be a time to sell him after this week, if you can make that trade, because if he plays well, sell high. But definitely Oubre is someone to watch. I think pretty much in Josh Hart, like you said, he's had double-digit rebounds, I think, in every game that Randall's been out. He had 8 more tonight going into the fourth quarter, so he may hit I don't know if the Knicks put their starters back in or not against the Grizzlies, but Josh Hart, you're going to get 10 plus rebounds from him on a nightly basis for a couple weeks. You definitely want to have him out there. And just to mention, Mitchell Robinson is working his way back.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like, but again, he was putting up good numbers, and then we had Hartenstein come out of nowhere. So it'll be interesting to see if he does work his way, around the All-Star break and come back, how they work him into that rotation. But for now, I think Josh Hart is definitely, a must add. And I do like Dosunmu on the Bulls. I think even though a little inconsistent, you can get a guy that gets you an average of close to 30 points in a fantasy league per night. You've probably got guys on your bench not doing that. So,
I mean, too, like with the Sumo and whatnot, if you trade away Caruso, if you trade away like DeRozan, all of a sudden, I don't think anybody really wants Vucevic that bad. But, then there's minutes and opportunities to be had there, too. And Kobe White can only take so many shots a game, too. He might try to take 30, but we'll see. I will say with Mitchell Robinson. So initially, like at the beginning, when he got hurt, it looked like he was going to be done for the season. Now it looks like he could be back towards the end of the season. So I think we're still probably, at least a month away for that. But when he does come back, if he can work up to some of the minutes, maybe a guy that you can stash on your IR or, the end of your bench, just depending on how deep your league is, that could help you out in some rebounds, some defensive stats, stuff like that too as well. But obviously a guy that has been hurt quite a bit throughout his career, though.
Yeah. I mean, it'll just be, interesting to see. I mean, injuries, obviously, for guys that, get hurt on a regular basis, usually tend to get hurt, again. So,
unfortunately.
But, yeah, I mean, and then talking about that trade deadline, before we get into that, I mean, we've talked about this guy a few times. So I'm going to bring him back up. It's Brandon Podziemski on the Warriors. He's still getting the minutes. He's still playing, 20 plus to 25 plus a night. He's producing. And back to the trade deadline. Do they trade Clay? Do they trade somebody else? I mean, he seems to be getting the minutes. Kuminga's come on really nicely. I think he's probably worth a quick mention because I still think he's widely available, probably 40%.
He's a lot more rostered now this week than a lot last couple, just because he's been playing so well like he's been the second best player for the Warriors.
Yeah, he's been going crazy. And I mean, again, if they, make those trades, even if they don't make those trades, Kuminga's probably going to be the guy that doesn't lose any minutes. Not that Podziemski will, but if they don't make those moves, I think, Kuminga's for sure going to get those consistent minutes. Although we've talked about Steve Kerr kind of being a little weird with what he does, but you just that kid off the court. But again, Podziemski has shown that he can be the guy if they make any moves and he's still playing those 25 minutes. He's definitely worth the ad. I know talking about the Wizards a little bit, Kyle Kuzma's in trade talks. If he does get traded, I think Denny Avdia is a nice name to look at. He's having a pretty quietly good year in Washington for a team that nobody pays attention to. Kuzma leaves that team. There's going to be a lot of volume to go around for a guy that already scores, close to 13 points a night, gets you some boards, gets you some assists. He's a very good player that most people don't know of. I would watch him and keep an eye on him around this trade deadline, especially if Kuzma gets moved, man.
And then just throw Koulibaly in there too as well. So if Kuzma gets traded, then Danny might slide down to the 4, and then you ultimately end up starting Koulibaly for the rest of the year too.
Yeah, and then I know we mentioned Scoot. We'll bring up Scoot Henderson. He's kind of a chuckster. He's a young guy. He's talented, but he is, still out there. He can give you big nights. And as the season goes on, I mean, if Brogdon gets traded from that team, he's going to be the guy that they look to score the rock on a consistent, basis. I mean, he should be able to get you, field goal percentage is a category I'd probably advise staying away. But if not, he should be getting 20 plus a night, the rest of the season, especially if Brogdon's not there. But I think you'll see his minutes increase anyway. And Portland has no business keeping Malcolm Brogdon. He's valuable enough to trade and get something back. I imagine, as quiet as it's been, he'll be a name that we see get moved. So is there anybody else outside of those guys that if a trade was to be made that you can think would kind of rise up that we haven't mentioned?
I mean, just going back to Portland, I mean, Brogdon probably gets traded just because he can be a good 6 man somewhere. He's proven it time and time again. Jeremy Grant could be another guy that gets moved too. But his contract, they gave him way too much money. Like when they signed him the last time, like he was just like, wow, can't believe that happened. But he could still be interesting for a team. He'd fit on a lot of different teams because he can play the 3 and the 4. He can play good defense. He can kind of fit in a lot of different roles. And if he gets moved, then Jabari Walker, who's been starting as of late, anyways, would probably take another step up too. We probably see that starting lineup shift around a little bit more. We'll see whether or not Shane Sharp ever returns at some point too. Maybe a guy to stash there, depending on how rostered he is. Um, just in general, I'm trying to think of like any other big situations, but there's not like as many like big names that we're looking at. I talked a little bit about before the show for Memphis. With all the guys that they've got out lately, GG Jackson's been playing more minutes. He's played pretty well most games, so he could be another guy to look at. I do have two other guys here just on waivers in general that we should probably talk about. Aaron Nesmith for the Pacers. He's small forward. He also has power forward eligibility on Yahoo. Somehow doesn't have it on ESPN, even though he started a ton of games there this year. He's 58% rostered on Yahoo, 20% on ESPN. He's been playing big minutes as of late, and he's actually played pretty well in those minutes just in general. Seems like the Pacers kind of solidifying this starting lineup and kind of the core rotations that they want to run. We'll see if they make any other moves at the deadline, though, because they got a couple excess pieces, too. They have a lot of young guys on this roster that they could potentially trade off and then, turn that into somebody maybe a little bit better at this point in time. And then last but not least, I do have Maxi Kleber. He is power forward, eligible only on ESPN, power forward and center on Yahoo. For the Dallas Mavericks, 5% rostered on Yahoo, which actually did jump up 4% since yesterday, and then 0% on ESPN. So he's pretty widely available. Derek Lively's out right now for at least who knows how long. He broke his nose. He's got that facial fracture. Some guys, they just put the little plastic mask on and they go out and play. Unfortunately, not the case for him, apparently, but been pretty good for Maxi Kleber. He's played over 30 minutes, I believe, the last two games, even playing on the back-to-back today. This is only like his 16th game of the year, too. He had a small toe dislocation early on in the year, which caused him to miss a lot of games in a row. Seems like that's kind of in the past now at this point in time. He's actually been playing pretty well as of late. And, even when Derek Lively comes back, he could still very much have a role on this team. The Mavericks still trying to sort pieces out. He's a guy that is good defensively. He can knock down the corner three, space the floor a little bit there too as well. So whether or not he's getting backup center minutes behind Derek Lively, playing a little bit of the four, could be a lot of different ways that he factors in down the stretch, especially now that he is ultimately healthy.
Nice. Yeah. So those are the guys we got there. I mean, in Lively, I know it's a nose right now, but he's had some, injury concerns throughout the year as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, even if he does come back, there's always that concern that, something happens. And like I said, they don't have much else, down there. So, I mean, if Kleber's getting you 30 minutes a night, I mean, he's definitely a solid option that's gotten it done before. Just haven't really heard much from him because he hasn't played much this year. So,
yeah, but I mean, like, too, at the same time, Derek Lively's still pretty young and he's like the high energy athletic big. But, if he's not going, like, if he's getting in foul trouble, if he's not good, like, if they're just not happy with what he's doing out there on the court, they can go back to Maxi and they're like, well, we got a solid defender here, a guy that can knock down shots, everything else like that, too. It seems like they really haven't been happy with what they got out of Grant Williams so far this year. Obviously, they've been a little bit happier about what they got out of Derrick Jones Jr. He's been kind of more the underrated signing, and then Josh Green's starting to turn the corner again too as well. So they got a lot of moving pieces here. We'll see when Exum comes back. He was playing pretty well for them earlier this season. So a lot of moving pieces and a lot of moving parts for them. It just kind of depends on how the coach feels on probably any given night at that point.
Yeah, Tim Hardaway Jr. over there too, who's kind of at times has shown, big splashes. Other times he's been a little inconsistent as well, but just another piece of that puzzle that you mentioned. So getting into some of the matchups this week, I know you have the Celtics down here. Quick question on that. I know Drew Holiday's been dealing with a little bit of an injury. Is there concern for him moving forward?
No, I don't really think so. I'm not sure exactly what the newest one is, but he's popped up a couple times throughout the year as questionable tag, everything else like that. I mean, if you got him, you still got him, but it's not anybody that you're going out of your way to play. He's played that fourth fiddle really much for that Celtics team this year too. Overall, you got Tatum, then Brown, then Porzingis, then him, and then heck, even Derek White's been playing pretty well this year too. So,
I mean, offensively, you can say fifth
that.
fiddle, sometimes. I mean, Derek White, gets in the scoring column too. So at times, I mean, Drew's not called upon to really score the rock that much on that team.
He's going out there. He's being that veteran presence. He's playing good defense. He had, even for him, he doesn't have to run as much offense as he probably done in years past. Even if you look, I mean, like you go back to Milwaukee, like Giannis is still high usage guy just in general. So he kind of took a back seat there, but probably even taking more of a back seat just because, Tatum's going to soak up some usage. He doesn't have to be the primary ball handler. You got Derek White there too, can kind of mix and match, which probably is good for this team overall. But for fantasy, it kind of, it kind of limits guys just in general. I mean,
Definitely. Is there anybody on the Celtics with this week outside of their stud players that you would stream in any format at all?
I don't think so necessarily. I mean, you're looking at the Hawks, the Wizards, and the Heat that they play this week, just in general. Should be a pretty good week for Kristaps Porzingis, assuming that he is all the way healthy at this point in time, which seems to be the case or close enough to it. Because the Hawks and the Wizards are both going to be good matchups. Wizards just bad versus centers in general. Hawks, it's not Clint Capella. He's going to be out for about a week. So Emeka Okongwu is out there. Good athletic, young center, but still not Clint Capella on defense.
Right.
Obviously, the matchup versus the Heat is a little bit tougher with Bam, but should just be pretty good overall. I would probably assume that most of those guys would have some good minutes versus the Wizards. Maybe you get into like a blowout situation, some of those backups pay off. I know Pritchard's kind of been up and down once again this year. He's had those really good stretches where he shot the ball well. So like if you really need to stream a guy on like a shorter day, you could probably go out there and throw him in there if you really needed to. But
Yeah,
other than that, probably not.
He and Hauser are kind of the only other two guys that play a little bit, and they're not enough
Yeah.
consistency, to plug them in. But like you said, I mean, if you're looking for a streamer in some of those games, I mean, especially Hawks Wizards, you got blowout potential, you got high point totals. I mean, those would be the 2 days where you might worth a flyer there for those guys. Looking at the
I will
Rockets,
say
yeah,
I will say too with the Celtics though, they are a team that very much plays down to the competition. So that
that is
is
true.
something to worry about.
Well, at least high scoring. So I mean, you would think. I mean, they weren't able to score much against the Lakers without AD and LeBron. So you never know. I mean, they definitely, like you said, have played down to that level. So should be two favorable matchups where those guys might be worth a stream. Might get
Mhm.
some extra action if the Celtics, decide to show up and take care of business for 3 quarters and let the bench do the rest of the work. But as we see in the NBA, that is not always the case. And when we
Mhm.
think it is going to be, those are the nights that it's not. So let's get into the Rockets here. We didn't mention him tonight, but we had mentioned Cam Whitmore, who has
Mhm.
come on strong lately. I think he's the guy worth mentioning this week on the Rockets, who've got the Pacers, the Raptors, and the Hawks, especially with the Pacers and the Hawks. Definitely some
Yep.
high flying potential there. The Hawks seem to give up like 130 every night. I mean, it just, they're
Yeah.
winning games, but they seem to give up a ton of points. We know the Pacers, they're a little bit better, but they're still giving up plenty of offense. Even with Siakam there, that's not changing much. And the Raptors, any given night, I mean, they're nothing special. They play a little bit better in the paint, but they're beatable offensively. So Whitmore and who else on Houston this week are we looking at?
So for the Rockets, just in general, too, you got these two. The Pacers and the Hawks are like two best matchups you can probably get. The Raptors, they were a little bit better defensively once upon a time. Just kind of depends on any given night with them now at this point in time, especially like with RJ Barrett on the team. Depends if he wants to play defense on that given night. And just some of those other pieces, quickly can defend when he wants to. It's just a lot of, do these guys want to show up on any given night? Which Raptors team do you get defensively? So that is a big question there. But for the Rockets, we see tonight against, so the Pacers game is actually tonight. So we see that Fred VanVleet's not playing tonight. Amen Thompson's getting the start. Amen Thompson's been playing better as of late too. So kind of a sneaky guy there. If he's out there, maybe you scoop him up as a speculative stash, if nothing else. Jalen Green did have a pretty good stretch there for a while. Two most recent games haven't been as good, but for like the 5 or 6 before that, he was really killing it. So definitely somebody there. Jabari Smith was doing pretty good before the injury, came back, played really good the first game back, and then the 2 games after that, not so good. Obviously, Sengun's going to be a guy that you want to target just in general, anyways. But kind of a lot of guys there. I mean, for the most part, probably like Jalen Green. If Fred VanVleet misses any more time like this week, which I'm not really expecting, then obviously Amen Thompson would be somebody to kind of stream on that given day, though.
Yeah, and of course you got everybody's favorite Dylan Brooks over there.
Nope. Nope. We're going to talk about him.
I saw somebody talking about him, and I thought, I don't know, man. I mean, he's got his moments, but yeah, he just doesn't offer too much. I mean,
I don't like him just in general. A lot of the stuff that he's done over the years too, even going back to his days at Oregon, but that's a whole different story for another day. And he's played really bad as of late too, like in terms of actual producing for fantasy, DFS perspective, and everything else like that.
he played a lot better in the beginning of the year. He seemed like he was kind of a decent fit there, but Houston also was playing a lot better out of the gate. I mean, they've come a lot back down to earth. They're young. They're not very good on the road. Dylan Brooks isn't that good to last, consistently do that over the full season.
Mm.
Van Fleet's kind of older and banged up. So, I mean, I think we're seeing a little more what this Rockets team looks like. And so, yeah, let's let these younger guys, man, Thompson and Whitmore, those are the guys, you want to look at. Those are the guys that should be playing for this Rockets team that, is not going anywhere in the Western Conference anytime soon.
Yep.
Who we got next? We're looking at the we
New
talked about
York.
the Knicks. I mean, Josh Hart is probably the guy. He did get 10 rebounds again tonight in that
Yeah.
game. So I think that's 6 games in a row for Josh Hart. And like you said, Randall's out, another 2 weeks. So I mean, if Hart's out there, I think he's a guy you want to pick up and plug in for the next couple weeks, consistently.
Yeah, anybody that's getting consistent big minutes on this Knicks team overall is going to be somebody that you want to play at this point in time, just because.
Taj Gibson and
No,
Malachi Flynn, the 2 leading minutes. Well, McBride, but the leading guys off the bench. Taj Gibson and Malachi Flynn. Getting 15 plus minutes for Tibbs Knicks. There's not much depth there right now. So yeah, I mean,
I'm kind of surprised that Flynn played more minutes than Deuce McBride, but maybe he got hurt or something too. Who knows at this point in time, the way they're going. Taj shouldn't be there much longer. Jericho Simpson was out, or Jericho Sims, excuse me, was out tonight with an illness. So, but if OG Anunoby misses, if OG and Quentin Grimes miss like the next couple of games, which could be the case, it's a wrist injury, it's an elbow injury, nothing major at this point in time. Then I mean, guys like Achua and Hart are going to be guys that you want just in general. When OG Anunoby comes back, then Precious Achua will go back to the bench most likely, and then we'll kind of roll from there. But Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, Precious Achua, if they're out there in your leagues for some reason, you should probably be picking them up.
Definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, we touched on the Knicks. I mean, the next team we have is the Sixers. We touched on, on their matchups. Yep. Coming up with the Warriors, Hawks, and Wizards. We mentioned, the guys to watch on that team. I don't think there's really too much to get back in with those guys. I mean,
no. I mean, like 76ers is mainly Maxey and Harris, which should be rostered already. We'll see kind of what happens with the rest of their situation. If you want to pick up like your Kelly Oubre Jr., you can play him. You can. You hope it's a good point scoring game for him. If it's a game where they don't need as much offense, though, they're kind of rolling a little bit more to like Patrick Beverley's way. We kind of saw a rebirth of guys off the bench, though, for them with all the other injuries, though. We see
Patrick Beverley's played some good basketball too. These last 5-6 games, I mean, he's come on pretty strong. He's not the worst option. I know you think fantasy, you don't think Patrick Beverley, but go look at the numbers. He's not a bad ad possibly either, but
he played really well when Maxey was out too, and he was starting. And then we were kind of seeing some extra minutes for guys like Furkman Korkmaz and Jaden Springer and whatnot. It's just not that great right now for the 76ers because they're missing, what was it, 2-3 starters right now, you call it, in Embiid, Batum, and DeAnthony Melton. And then some of those guys that would be playing those minutes, your Robert Covington, some of those other guys, they're out too. So they're, they have decent depth when you look at it from an initial perspective, and that's why they're still surviving, but it's still not pretty at the same time.
Yeah, even Harris has dealt with a little bit of, nicks and bang ups too, a little. But obviously, I mean, he's played well, and he's obviously probably the biggest beneficiary. I mean, Maxey's already an all-star. You know what you're going to get there. But, I mean, Harris, you gotta look to him to be that offensive catalyst for that team outside of Maxey, for the next month. I mean, he's the guy, and he can be the guy, right? That's what they got him for. That's what he went there for. And he's kind of, I think at times takes a back seat, and maybe it's hard to be Mr. Consistent when you do that to Maxey and Embiid, but the next 4 weeks, it's no Embiid. So he's shown that he can rev it up. And I think, he's definitely the biggest, beneficiary outside of Tyrese, of course. So
yeah, for sure. And the thing with him too, is the games that he's missed lately, it's not been because of injury. He's been sick 2 times in like the last week and a half. So he missed like 2-3 games. He missed like 2 or 3 games with an illness, and then I believe what was it? Was that yes? Whenever their most recent game they played, he was questionable with an illness too as well. It's like, dang, this dude's sick again. Like, it's just kind of unfortunate, but rolling with him and Maxey, the offense changes a little bit. They're running probably a little bit more of a pick and pop, give and go with those two guys more so than kind of when Embiid's around. But at the same time, you get to use Tobias Harris in a way that is very efficient for him, as kind of opposed to taking the backseat. Kind of some of that give and go, using him a little bit more as a passer because he is an underrated passer. That is something that he does do pretty well.
Definitely. And then we got 2 more teams on here. I think we got the Suns and we got the Nuggets. Suns, kind of the usual. We've mentioned these guys probably on each show. I mean, you're playing your studs, but I mean, Allen, Gordon are probably the 2 main
I
names, right?
mean, Gordon's not even playing well enough, like, to consider it at this point in time. His minutes are really ticking down. So, like, Grayson Allen would be kind of the biggest beneficiary here. It is the revenge game versus the Bucks tonight, if you're into that type of thing. But the Bucks, the Jazz, and the Warriors, they're all going to be good pace-up spots just in general. I think moving forward, I'm interested to see if the Bucks play as fast and as bad defensively as they did under Coach Griffin. Now that Doc Rivers is there, or if they kind of take back the pace a little bit, play a little bit better defense with Doc Rivers there. So it'll be something interesting to see for sure. I think there was a story too about Doc Rivers, how he was saying that he's going to be like the All-Star game coach now based on the Bucks record.
Yeah.
And he said he was going to give it was either part or all of his salary from that game to Coach Griffin that did coach the team for the beginning part of the year too. So that is
There
a
you
nice
go. Well,
gesture to see.
that's a nice gesture there. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the other night, when they gave up 40 points in the fourth quarter and only scored 13 to blow that game in Utah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how much this Bucks team's going to be any different with whoever's at the helm. Their coaching carousel is a nightmare, but it is what it is. You want to pay 3 coaches and be the same team. I mean, they were 30-13 with Griffin. It's not like they were, yeah.
I mean,
Whole nother story, whole other conversation. It has no fantasy relevance, but
yeah, there's a lot of other implications there too, it sounds like. So
players coaching. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. We'll see. I don't see that team going any farther than where they would have gone originally. But, maybe Doc gets some time with them. They find, like you said, they find a little more defensive identity. They've got the talent, so we'll see what happens there. And then you got the Nuggets down here who are kind of always
So the next group here is just these are the 4 teams this week that only play 2 games. So we got the Nuggets, the Blazers, the Jazz, and the Timberwolves. Those teams only play 2 games this week.
Everybody else plays 3 or 4. There's 10 teams.
And there's a couple of 4
games. Yeah, 10 that play 4, I think, and 16 that play 3 games this week, and then those guys. Yeah, so there's a lot going on, man. I mean, there is some injury news. There are a lot of players that we talked about. And then we got the trade deadline here on the 8th. So I think after that, we'll definitely have to maybe pop on this weekend and kind of discuss, some big things after that if we can, get on before next week. But we'll definitely discuss those implications when we're back next week. Go over a lot of these names that we had, new situations. What does that Bulls roster look like? What does that Warriors roster look like? The Raptors, what – Lakers come out of nowhere, make a move. Who knows? I mean, I think we'll see some fireworks, but it'll be fun to get into that, man, because we had a lot of names, I think, tonight that were worth mentioning, and a lot of the things that happen or don't happen, will change the roles for those guys moving forward and kind of change that list of priority.
Yeah, it's always interesting because, like, the NBA trade deadline is never slow, but it's not always as big as it's been like last year. We got Kevin Durant moving, we got Kyrie Irving moving around that time. Like, we don't see where it's usually that big, but there's always a lot of transactions. So last year, it seemed like there's a lot of transactions, plus a lot of the big ones. If you go back like 2 years ago, I think there's 26 trades, I want to say, off the top of my head. It was somewhere between 22 and 26. But a lot of them were, more of the role players and everything else like that. It didn't feel like a very impactful trade deadline, but there's still a lot of moves. And some of those underrated moves are some of the ones that ultimately end up being the best sometimes, though.
Yeah, we mentioned, right? Like, I mean, maybe Caruso, right? Not DeRozan, maybe Gary Trent Jr., guys that we're not quite thinking of the bigger names, but, impact players depending on where they go. So it'll be fun to see. Man, another good time. Already 16 weeks into the fantasy season. So, hopefully everybody's doing okay. Hopefully some of these moves will help you out. And, we'll be back after the trade deadline. Anything else you want to say, Coach?
No, not too much going on right now. Obviously, we'll be looking forward to that trade deadline. We'll be looking forward to the All-Star break too. I think me personally, I'm kind of looking forward to the All-Star break. Enjoy the festivities and a little bit less content grind for myself, with the NBA DFS. But I don't know about you for the All-Star break. I always love watching the Celebrity All-Star game just because it's so fun. You never know what's going to happen in it.
Have you seen they have like a like all glass court that they're using for that game or something?
I
It's
think
like
I
some
saw
crazy
like a picture
technology that
about
they
it.
got going on.
I think I saw a picture about it, but that's about it.
Yeah, I don't know exactly the full details, but something about an all glass court that they're using for the celebrity game, and I think some of the other events, not for the actual game, but at least for those. So it'll be interesting to see. The NBA always makes it fun. I mean, these guys get into it. It's definitely a little more exciting than the Pro Bowl events, I would say,
Hey, we got Jalen
and it
Brown
is
in
a
the dunk.
break.
We got Jalen Brown in the dunk contest this year. So like I know people aren't excited about like some of the Mac McClung's coming back, but like you're not like we're not excited, but we haven't been excited in a while. But like we got Jalen Brown in it. That's better than we usually get.
It's
I
an
don't know why
all-star
Jaime.
name, it's an all-star name, right? Like we haven't
Mhm.
really had that all-star player being in it. So now we're getting an all-star caliber, a max contract guy actually participating in the event. So
Maybe
it'll be
that
cool, man. Like you said,
maybe
it's a
that
break from
shifts
the
some stuff
grind.
just in general though. Maybe we see some more bigger names do it in the future, especially like if he comes out and wins too. That'd be another thing too. Somehow Jaime Jaquez Jr. is in it. No offense to him, but I don't think of a big time dunker when I think of Jaime Jaquez Jr.
No, well, he would be if he can find a way to win it. He'll definitely be the first Latin-born player to win the dunk contest. I don't even know if anyone else has even been in it, so he might already have that.
No,
That
well, Juan Toscano Anderson was in it a couple years ago,
that's
but
right.
he's I believe from Mexico.
Yeah, I think he is too. So it'll be fun, man. We'll see. We got, trade deadline coming up, all-star weekend coming up, kind of turning that corner towards the last third of the season. So yeah, with that being said, man, thank you again, Coach. Always fun to shoot some NBA action, talk with you. And we'll be back next week. Remember to check both of us out, man, on X at Coach Craig Sports, at SoCal Ball Nerd. Check out the sports affiliation, which is where we are both from. This, of course, is the Fantasy Football Advice Network. Will be the Fantasy Sports Advice Network, as it's going to be football, basketball, and baseball, and more sports moving forward as time goes. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Keep checking us out individually and on the sports affiliation. And with that, man, we'll be back next week. Thank y'all. Take care.